Okay, we're going to take a look at variables and printing. So we're going to build on what we did in the last lesson. If you remember, I used score equals 20 in the last lesson, and I said that score was a variable. We'll deal with variables and how they work and what they look like a little bit later in the course. So what I'm asking you to do at the moment is just to accept what I say about variables, and that they just hold something. And really it's to do with printing and the difficulty we get with printing. So let me say I'm going to get a person's name. So I might have a variable called name. Name equals John. And I might have a score equal to 35, which is fine. And then I can start playing around with print statements, but instead of having green strings in my print statement, I'm just going to have variables. So I could do print name and plus score. And the problem is I'm going to get an error, and the reason I'm going to get an error is because I'm trying to join a number and a string, and it won't like it. There we go. However, if I did print name, comma, score, it will be fine because they're different types. It will just print it out. There you go, John 35. But the issue is that when I'm programming, these might appear in my program right at the very top, and this might be halfway down, and I won't know necessarily what they contain. It's quite difficult to know in my program, so I could make a lot of errors in my program. What you need to do is read the error message, start from the bottom, find out what it is. It's a data type error, it's a joining error. I've tried to join a string and an integer together and I can't do it, and it's given me where it or the line it's occurred on, print name plus score. It couldn't understand what that was because one's a string and one is a variable, and it's told me where the error is, line 1 in this. If you were in a program, it would probably say line 30 or something like that. But variables are quite important. That was fairly easy. I could see name and score. But if I wasn't very careful in naming my variables, I might do something like this. A equals John. So I've not been very careful. I haven't made a variable that has any sort of sense to it. It didn't tell me what it is. And B equals 25 this time. Whoops, this is a number. 25. I've used A and B as my variable names, and they don't really represent what the actual values are here. So if I did print A and join it with B, I'm going to get my error message. But it's very difficult to sort of see why I've made the mistake unless I really know and go back over my program to find out. So naming variables is quite a challenging task. In fact, it's one of the hardest tasks in computing, is thinking up new variable names. So here I've used print A and B, and that's worked fine. Now, this is one of the things that often makes me or stops me in my tracks. I have lots of errors like this when I'm programming because I've joined two data types incorrectly. So I don't actually like using this plus or this comma. I use a different method, and let's see if we can go for it. Let me get a new shell so that we can see clearly what's going on. Okay, I use something called format. So let me give you the two values again. Let's do name equals Jill and score equals 43. So I've got a string and I've got a number. And if I wanted to print out a message, so let's do this. Print name, that's Jill, plus scored, and then I need a comma, and then score, another comma, and then the word points. So I'm trying to make a sentence out of this information here that will work when I try to print it. And I've had to use a plus there, scored, and commas because I've got a string and an integer and a string, so I've got to join them with commas, and it comes up nicely. But take a look at that. Even I made a slight little error in there, so I'm going to copy that, paste it, and neaten it up. It starts to become a bit of a I got the wrong one. It starts to become a bit of a problem. Whoops. When you're doing it and you get frustrated and all sorts of things. So let's run that one. There we go, that's a lot nicer. But what I want you to notice is the colours. I've got orange, then black, then green, then black, then green. It sort of changes colour all the way along, and sometimes I don't know where I am, particularly if I start using single quotes in here as well. We can get ourselves into an awful mess. So there's a different way of actually printing out a string. And I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it nicely. We start off with print, orange, then comes our string, and inside the string we do something called a placeholder. So that's a curly brace, so you'll find that on top of the square brackets next to the P on the keyboard. And we're going to put 0 in there. I'm going to close the square brace, close my string, and then use dot format, the word, and then open and close round brackets, and inside there I'm going to put name. And what's going to happen is it's going to take whatever the variable name was, which is Jill, and it's going to replace all of that with the word Jill. It's called a placeholder, and when I run it, it just prints out Jill. Now the nice part about placeholders is you don't need to think about these pluses and minuses, and you don't need to think about whether you've got a string or a number. They just work. They just replace whatever's in here where the place is. So I'm going to write this thing out again, name, scored, score, points, in my new way. So I'm going to use print. Remember, I'm going to use double quotes and a dot format, and then open and close brackets. Now let's start off with what was it? So the first thing I wanted was the name, so I'm going to call that 0 and put it in here, name, and then in here I just continue writing my string, scored. Now I need the score, so I'm going to put curly brackets and a 1. And the reason why I put a 1 is because I'm going to put score in here. So this is my 0, this is my 1, and if I continued it would be 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. It always starts at 0 and then carries on. So print scored 1. It's a little bit difficult to read, I suppose, but I think what you gain from the colours and the ease of use far outweighs trying to work it out. And then I've just got to put points in there. So I've only got a string. It's all green. Got no pluses and no changing colour in here. So it starts orange, goes green, and finishes off black. And as long as I've got matching values in here, I'm fine. So I can just press enter, and then it says Jill scored 43 points. That was easy. So I can use them as much as I like. So let's do that one again. Let's do a 0 and a 0. Right, so I can keep using them. And a 1 and a 0 and a 1 and end my string, and then dot format, name and score. And what should happen here is it will replace all of these zeros with the name, which will be Jill. So it will be Jill, 43, Jill, 43. There we go. Jill 43, Jill 43. And that makes it a little easier to actually make your strings appear on the screen. You do have to be careful though. Let's take this one again. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste that in there. Let's say I actually accidentally made that into 2 instead of 1. It's going to give me an error. And the reason it's going to give me an error is because I don't have the number 2. I've got 0, 1 and no 2. So if I tried that, it's going to give me an error and say index, so this value 2 is out of range. Tuple is a data type. It's a data type that looks like, well, let me do this one. My tuple equals 1, 0. In other words, like a coordinate. So if I did type my tuple, it would say, oh, syntax, invalid name. Let's copy this one. Let's do that one again. Type Control C is going to make a fibber out of me. Yeah. Oh, that's why. So let's try that one again. I can see what the problem is. Now, the only reason I've worked out what the problem is because of this word arguments. It's telling me that I need to put a round bracket there and then type my tuple, and it will work nicely. See, even the best make errors. And it says the type is a tuple. So anything in round brackets looking like that is known as a tuple. It's also known as arguments. There's lots of words for it. Parameters is another one, and we'll see that as we go through the course. I think you're beginning to get the idea that this course is full of long, strange words that you need to learn the meaning of.